Hello from Village Hall.
June 1st, our workshop. Here in the studio, Trustee Fatty, Trustee Starbuck, Trustee Bosey, and me, Mayor Foley, and our clerk, and Trustee Phillips is joining us. Phillips Woods is joining us online. Nice to see our usual crowd. So we have a few items of business tonight. One is mostly thinking things through. But first, under opportunity to request to modify, item 9, the town of Phillipstown is in the midst of doing work at Highway. They need a water connection, but they have not yet figured out the size pipe they need. So they asked us to table that for now. And then, unless, I think we may have quorum issues on a couple of the minutes. I have to admit that I did not make it all the way through the minutes. So I was going to suggest tabling the minutes until next week, unless anyone has any objection.
No objection.
Okay with that, Tweeps?
Fine.
So some of them you need me and you and Eliza to vote, or some combination of us, but yeah, I haven't read it enough. Okay, announcements. We in Village Hall have a remaining box, about a half box of COVID tests that came from the county. They are expiring this month. So if anybody wants to come pick them up to get them used before they're not good anymore, that'd be great to get them out. They're in a box in front of Jeff's office. Yard waste is next Thursday, June 9th, right? Yep. So that's coming up. Anybody else have any other items that you think need to be announced? Okey-doke.
I bought paper bags.
You bought paper bags. Well done.
The EV charger is installed at Town Hall
that's right, this week.
tomorrow. And there's a ribbon cutting at 7 p.m. that I'm sure everyone would be welcome to join. And it's just great news that in the village we'll have an EV charger.
I'm correct, it's a pay, it's not a card, it's a make a donation.
That's right.
For the energy at this point.
That's right.
Cool. Well, I hope it gets well used. At some point, I think it will be very useful to talk about a charger at the municipal lot.
Yeah.
It's a very logical place to put one. Okay, so for a little bit of context, as we bring you up to speed, in 2015, when Catherine was a trustee for the first time, a legislation was approved to create residential parking districts. So under New York State law, we're a home rule state. The village, in the same way that we don't have the capacity to collect taxes at the local level for particular things, we don't have the ability to identify parking districts. So we have to go to the state and say, we'd like to make these streets resident parking for these reasons. So that was done twice in 2 pieces, right? Lower Main Street, Fish. First district is Fish North. Let me go to my office. I might have left it in the office. Several down in Lower Main, and then in the next section was west of Main Street, 11 streets. Oh, here we go. So above the MTA line, 11 streets were approved in 2015, and the district was not implemented. Stone Railroad, Cross, Church, Haldane, Northern, Rock, Furnace, and part of Kemble, from Main to the intersection with Wall and Rock Street. So we have been enabled by the state to make those resident parking permits, or resident parking designated areas. And last year, a parking committee, new iteration of the committee, reviewed possibilities and all of the details that would need to be met to comply with state law. For example, 20% of the parking needs to remain available as parking to the public, free parking to the public. Figuring out what residents would be eligible for permits, what portions of the streets would be eligible, what signage would be needed, how could we manage in the context of metering on Main Street, how do we deal with workers on Main Street, during the week if we meter Main Street. So that board came with a series of recommendations. The ad hoc committee came forward with a series of recommendations last August. And those recommendations were accepted by the Board of Trustees and made the choice not to implement them. The implementation is the piece that has gotten everybody stuck all this time. So we have, we've inherited this really good work by this committee that spent a lot of time and thought through many possibilities and made strong recommendations. And I asked Catherine and Eliza to have a look at those recommendations and figure out what we could do to get this rolling. We really need to be able to meter on Main Street to capture that revenue for the village when we have meters, but we need to make sure that our residents have meter spaces available first. So as I think the goal for tonight is to come to consensus around some big issues that will focus our work, establish action items, and then make note of the actual code matters that we need to make it happen. There are a few small tweaks to make. So I'm going to ask Catherine to tell us about her proposal, which is to begin first presentation of the resident portion. Get your feedback.
So that original committee made 4 recommendations, and the first was to do the parking phase of it. The second would be the app-based metering, but really, I suppose can't the right word, but it would be like the garbage, like too many things going on at the time, and we want to be able to see how the parking permit works and have that all nice and smooth before we move into parking. So we're just going to focus on that, and that entails doing the other 2 recommendations, which are informing the public and making sure they know where the free and dedicated parking is. We have consensus, I think, on the board and before you, but to do it in stages, because as I said, it's just too much to try to put it all at the same time.
Well, let's do we have consensus on that? Start with resident.
I'm still in continuing concerned about Main Street residents being a Main Street resident without a driveway and having being removed part of the time and cordoned off on all the side streets. I mean, I can adjust, and so will anyone, but it's not equitable. It's not even, it's not fair. And I've asked over and over again and never gotten any clear answer about whether or not we can go to the state for an adjustment in rules, maybe it's a year or 2, but asking to include Main Street in that residential parking district and have all of permit Main Street. I'm not talking about putting residential permits Main Street, either Main Street, that's where our revenue is, that's where we want to get it. But allowing those Main Street residents to park the residential with the other one. This question has never been answered. I don't know who to ask.
So for context, as has been explained and as we understand currently, business districts cannot be included as identified residential area. Main Street, no, it is a chunk of it is residential, a chunk of it is mixed use. So the committee identified the fact that cannot issue resident permits for the folks on Main Street to side streets. And I think Eliza's point is good, is that how can we modify, what would the process be? Be going back in the same way we did with the vacancy tax, make a home rule request. I think we've something to start, so we need to get it rolling.
Yeah.
But I think that's a really good point, and maybe that's something that while we will have the senator who's been with us, and we can ask through that office.
We're aware of all the free stuff at the beginning of the
I am.
street and all of northern.
Everybody else is aware of that. It's and you at the farmers market on Saturday, and you come in those spots. on, then you park up in front of your house or wherever on the upper village, or somewhere else. But
Well, it's a challenge for everybody with driveway all around the village for sure, but more concentrated in the lower village.
when you're, you know, access is removed other than being paid for meter, it's different.
That's why I think it's really important to stage this and find out, you know, law of unintended consequences, right? We need to find out what those are and find some solutions for them. I did some language, I don't know if it was in Hyde Park or Tuckahoe or Irvington. One of them said parking permit for Main Street area. I like that word area. Because say Main Street.
Well, maybe that was a workaround. Tuckahoe?
I'm looking for it now because I have it. I didn't mark it up, but I thought if it came up, I would totally, you know, be able to like do that as a workaround.
It would be useful to go back to that August.
Parking reside in the permitted, well, this one says you live in the area. That's New York. I was just looking for applications. Vehicles owned by Main Street area residents within the residential, with a residential parking permit may park.
What municipality is that?
This is the Village of Irvington, our favorite.
That's a lot of.
They do other things, right?
It would be useful, Laura, to, and again, this is one thing to tell you ahead of time. Back and watch all of the public hearings that were, not public meetings that were held on this topic.
Yeah.
And help to revise, shape the final submission to the board on our website, Trustees, under parking committee, and the date. And it's useful to hear some of the discussion that was had by folks who live in apartments street and don't have a park. I mean, it's, you know, it's also like being in an apartment in the city, right?
Yeah.
You rent, you don't necessarily have a parking space.
And in many of the places, almost all of the buildings on this side of Main Street, I don't want to say almost, a fair amount, especially in this parking all behind the buildings. Everything at 719 has it, 95 has it, 95 has it.
That's Trump doing this.
Yeah.
My town, about 30 residents are losing parking.
But how many of them
who
like
don't-
don't have cars?
Who,
There's a
no, I'm counting the cars that are parked on the street on Main Street and are not using back their parking lots. But that's the only thing I can count because I'm not.
The cars that are
looking.
consistently.
Cars are consistently parked on Main Street at night.
Mhm.
Like when there's no tourists or anything, it's 20 to 30 cars.
Mhm.
So potentially 20 to 30 residents are losing their parking, and it's not comparable to New York City because in New York, all residents have the same parking. Where in Cold Spring, it's this group that is really not given like the same option that others are given.
And if there weren't the state restriction, we would be, and we give a permit to someone who lived on Main Street, and then they would park on a side street. That
At least
that
give
would
it
be
a
okay, like
solution.
that is like
Yeah.
the compromise that
Yeah.
I understand, and there's, okay, I get it.
see it when we actually issue permits. Were there 120 spaces? So that's what it was. So we see how many applications we have because there may be area residents that, you know, I don't know that every resident is gonna put 2 cars in the street and use up 121 spaces, right?
Well, that
You may
calculation was based on a count of driveways and properties with driveways, property without driveways, and the idea that if you had a driveway, you could be eligible for, well, you'd be eligible for one, and if you didn't have a driveway, you'd be eligible for 2. And I think that also is a question in my mind. you know, as we've said before, our linear feet on our public streets are an asset, right? And it has been free parking for a long time, always, for always. But it's an asset that we in some way need to be monetizing, whether it's by metering during the day or resident permits at night. We're renting spaces basically. But I do wonder if it's wise to assign 2 permits per house, those that don't, or excuse me, assign where there already is a driveway. I know that families have multiple cars, but we also have we're limited to 80% of the district.
There is in Irvington, they have a number of vehicles per household, number of off-street parking, like how many permits they give. I mean, as I said, I think generally, if there's an adequate driveway, where people aren't just using it on snow days, there are some that are pretty tight fit and it's hard to get into them, but I think most people do use their driveways if they have one.
Is there a table anywhere that shows like these numbers that we've been talking about, numbers of
Spaces?
spaces,
It's on
numbers
the-
of how many but like,
Oh,
that are also showing how many cars we expect
yeah.
residents, that we think residents have.
In the whole report, there are the free parking. Middle Square had 15, Metro North 50, Main Street weekdays.
I don't know that the committee took a survey on how many cars were parked on the street. I don't think that was a part of their work. I did some of that work myself to get those numbers. And gathered that at night, parking was filled about like between 53 and 63% on the side streets, on the residential side streets on the road. So there was a margin. And I can pull that information and provide that in sort of table format if that would help.
Because I'm just trying to wrap my head around if we created the residential program and then we opened up permits. How many do we expect? Does it fit within the numbers that we have in the, right, we need to have a 20% available
It's
for the
121 spaces.
And are we selling only that many? Or are we willing to sell more with the assumption that everyone is gonna put their car out at the same
We're
time?
restricted to 80%, to assigning 80%.
But we can only sell that many permits then. Okay.
How many houses are on these blocks?
So sorry, I'm having a hard time connecting to it.
Sorry if I'm just trying to.
No,
wrap
no,
my head around the number.
it's a big topic. It's a
Yeah.
big topic. And maybe we need some more time to be able to go back and review the supporting documentation. Some of us sat through the discussions,
Yeah.
and I personally felt that what the committee arrived at in the end was a really good first. It wasn't perfect, and no solution is going to be perfect, but it was a good first step to get us started.
Yeah.
And sort of launching, seeing where things need to be tweaked and fixed, and going forward. I mean, the same as Kevin said, the same way that we've discovered things we didn't think about in garbage, and we've addressed them.
Yeah, things come up and you address them. You just try to find a fair way to help our neighbors put their garbage somewhere. We'll find some place for their cars.
And Jeff, do you have Marie's backup documentation to these slideshows where she
No,
documented by
It's only
spreadsheet?
between 10 and 5 every day as well.
I'd have to check it.
It's only between 10 and 5. So it's not overnight.
On weekends only. and
Parking
holidays.
committee as a whole.
Daily, it
is
says.
a short way.
Oh. I thought
I
it,
think you just want to just to answer the question from Jeff.
Yeah, I don't know who has the data to it. This was a number, it was the parking committee.
Alright, so that's a question that we can ask Jack,
Yeah.
is who holds the backup data.
so the last recommendation they gave was parking 7 days a week on Main Street? Or the permits are daily? Okay. But not the Main Street meters.
The Main Street meters, we have the opportunity to adjust as we wish. I mean, at some point, I think that we do need to have some recognition that as the season grows longer, we are visitor nation all through the week, and it's so it's balancing accessibility for residents with being able to pull in revenue from Main Street. One among the things that was discussed by the parking committee, and I think we need to look at very carefully when we get to that stage on Main Street, is the expansion of 15-minute quick stop locations.
You know, I went to Nyack and I ran in the bakery shop to pick up the cake. I put like $1.80 in there, you know, on the clock. Just,
This is kind of how the rest of the world.
they expect
Functions.
it. They actually expect.
Well, I think
you to-
residents don't
No, no,
expect, because there never has been, and we do have to find a balance. But I think we also need to recognize that among the goals of this committee was finding ways to reduce looping vehicles, finding ways to reduce vehicular traffic and encourage pedestrian traffic. And we do live in a village that's 0.6 miles square. And so some of this is forming new user habits in the village as well, or expanded user habits for walking. The challenge is grocery day, right? When you go up Route 9 and come home with bags and bags of groceries, and you're in a house without a driveway.
Seniors, kids,
Yeah.
all those challenges that are daily life challenges for not everybody, but the people who are the most challenged.
Yeah, on the other hand, there's a benefit for people on streets, on side streets where they're fighting for spaces.
Yeah.
When they don't have a driveway and tourists,
They won't
you know, or
be
visitors
fighting
have come.
hikers anymore.
They're actually fighting village workforce. One street in the village is completely inundated with one business's workforce, without naming names.
That's addressed as a recommendation as well from the committee, is
And that
along
person
Kemble
can't
Avenue,
Go to the store on Saturday at all.
Kimball down.
along the Marathon
Yeah.
property, we have two strips of property along that open field, one on Kemble and one on the boulevard.
Mhm.
And that was identified by the committee as appropriate workforce parking during the day. You know, one of the discussions that was had in these sessions was, well, I recall an employee saying, well, I had to have to walk another 4 minutes. But yes, and we need to have turnover. We need to have turnover on our Main Street on the weekends. And so what struck me when this was presented was the conversation around everybody in it, like we're all in this together, and everybody having to give up a little something to gain for the overall benefit of a village that is strangled with vehicles.
So with the phased approach, so the permits would be issued for these side streets, and but Main Street residents at this point would still then parking on Main Street or the free spaces.
Both.
They would park on both, and workforce, same thing, Main Street and free spaces.
So
I mean, I would like to see workforce be sort of the next kind of phase to find, you know, to get them off Main Street. But, you know, I mean, I think we really have to make sure that the residents are not upset, you know, or not having big problems, you know. Yes,
Work out the
sort of
kinks on
like,
this piece
it's
first.
sort of like the size of the garbage can thing.
Yeah.
You know, I got too big, I got too small.
That's something I would attack.
That's what you know.
He's gonna hear all the
You know,
complaints.
it's sort of like Mama Papa Bear, you know, the porridge is too hot, the porridge is too cold around here. So, you know, we want to find the right temperature for the porridge for these streets and then move forward. I think, I mean, baby steps are important here. I'm not, you know, a fan or an advocate for this huge rollout, but we have to start because if we don't start, we're never getting anywhere.
Yeah, and the revenue is really important, to the village and everybody who lives there. I do find it a little bit like if we're starting slow, like first steps, and we're issuing the permits to the side streets. I think that if you do that and suddenly side streets are off limits to everyone else, Main Street's gonna get packed. And the Main Street residents will be crowded out real fast.
I mean, Main Street residents are crowded out anyway.
Yeah, everybody is, but like, if we're proposing to go into where our aim is to get to weekends first, weekends on Main Street, right? Metering Main Street on weekends. And we're giving these residential permits 7 days a week. Is that necessary? Is the question. Like, could we just do the weekend permits? Like the permits are only,
You don't have to only park in the resident permit area during the week. But it means that, I mean, and what I'm saying is your car isn't restricted from parking in other places in the village.
but why would you park anywhere but in front of your house?
But I thought that's what you were asking, is if you, could you use,
No, I'm saying
you wouldn't be, you
we're
wouldn't,
suddenly taking these streets off of everybody who parks on Main Street. That's the
80%
business
of
owners.
the street.
That's gotta stop right away.
I mean, until you put meters on Main Street, you're not gonna be able to stop it.
If I can just jump for a second, what I think you will have more than like residents or Main Street residents using Main Street, I think you're gonna have the workforce population.
Yeah,
And I'm gonna tell you right now, Leonora, God bless her, she used to tell me the day she saw my employees in, my uniform shirt, she saw a uniform of mine on the street, she didn't send anybody in my business that day. And that's, I mean, it's really a question of, like, if you can't eat in my restaurant because my employee's on Main Street, you can be sure my employee is not gonna be. All my people park down by the Constitution anyway.
I know, but that's one business on Main Street and not all. And it's gonna be pretty hard to police that.
But most shops have like one person, maybe two, max three. I've got 13 people. I mean, I do have people, a waiter in Nelsonville, I mean, I have walkers, somebody who's taken the train from Peekskill. So when you talk about a restaurant and they are not carpooling. I mean, specifically, I was talking about workforce at an eatery in Village, picking up an entire street.
Well, you can't have it both ways.
No.
In this setting, you can't both advocate for higher turnover so you can have more customers and advocate for parking your car on Main Street all day. I mean, that just doesn't work. And if that's something, if that's a point that folks can't get past in logic, I'm not sure where we go from there. Because if your own car is taking up the parking where you want your shoppers to park.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not throwing sympathy to business owners who park on Main Street. I'm mostly worried about the residents there because now they can't park on the side streets and all those business owners are gonna be parking on Main Street.
Again, 20% of the streets are reserved for open public parking. We are not allowed to make them permitted areas. So some of this may be putting your car early on Saturday morning. It does restrict movement, but I think it also has some, on some level, there has to be a reality check. If you're living in an apartment on Main Street and your landlord did not give you parking, the same way when you live in a more urban area, you can't always imagine going to have a space waiting for you there, right?
These residents are paying the rent taxes, the fees for Cold Spring, just like everybody else. So they shouldn't be given a letter like,
So what's the solution you
Access.
propose?
well, again, I really think that we have to, you know, like pursue making sure that we can provide residents on Main Street with those permits.
So right now, we can't, and we can either sit here and say, all right, we have to wait a year to get the answer to this, or we say, we can begin here with working toward those solutions. I don't think myself that stop waiting for another, for the Senate and the Assembly action again is a viable option. I think we have to start the process and see how it works with the 20%.
I mean, I can tell you, almost half of the building behind me, I mean, I could probably ask him to give me more parking in the restaurant for my employees, because that building, people are just not coming to Cold Spring renting with cars. The newer people that I know. That's not, you know, a reason that someone's an apartment or they formulate the law. I think you may see that there isn't shortage parking for Main Street residents that you may think there is.
20 to 30 cars I have counted.
Also 20 or 30 cars, and it's 20% of 121.
It may be.
And if it isn't, then we will work towards a solution for that. But we have to start somewhere.
It's a soft piece, but can we, when rolling out, do particular outreach to Main Street businesses and kind of make the case that you're saying of like, yeah, but especially really encouraging workforce parking in other places to help address Main Street parking. Um,
Absolutely. I mean, that has to be part of the
Yeah.
conversation. And I think the trickiest part of this is going to be much the same way that it was with garbage, is communicating in multiple fora.
yeah.
You know, one thing I learned very clearly with garbage is no matter how well we communicate, we're always missing a chunk of people. There's some people who never read anything, whether it's social media or ads or articles, and fall through the cracks, and suddenly the change happens and, oh my God, how did we get here? Well, we've been working on this for a long time and you're just coming in. There's no way to avoid that. We do our best to communicate, and I think we have to sort of be hyper communicative with this project, but there will always be somebody who didn't know. And we'll be upset. And again, keep coming back to all of us giving up some so that the greater
For the greater good.
for the greater good.
How about like posters on Main Street
It's a great idea.
that show the map? This is where residential parking, permit parking only is going to be. You can no longer park here without getting a ticket. And here's where free parking will be. And
I'll tell you where I think it starts specifically for Main Street is with the landlords. Because I can tell you that my landlord, the management person, who, you know, does all this stuff. She didn't know anything.
What about garbage? That was the case with a lot of landlords.
A lot of landlords, so I
And we
think,
had direct communication from the village, twice.
oh yeah,
so
so I called and I said to her, did you see this come to you? Yeah. You know, you can get extra garbage cans. You have to, you know, call. Don't call the company. Call us. You
So
know,
maybe that's a prong of this specific specific engagement. It's a letter, but call to or something,
to the
management company.
the posters should be in the lobby of all the apartment companies, but try and get to them.
it's okay. There's somebody in the building over there that keeps putting their chocolate and junk, all their recycling in my stuff. I mean, they have 3 recycling bins up there, and guess how many wine bottles they got yesterday.
Oh, okay, moving on. So we haven't heard tweets. Do we have some consensus moving forward with this first piece?
Doesn't sound good. I mean, personally, I think this is the way to move forward. I do think it's a big project, and I think realistically we have to move pieces of this forward, and I don't see any way around. I mean, it's going to be pain. Everyone is going to experience pain. We just need to like accept that and move on and find, as Catherine has noted multiple times already, that we have to take a stab at it, try, and we will learn things and we will fix and make changes as we go. But if we don't take a first step and wait until some sort of perfect magical moment that doesn't exist comes to light, like it's just, this is a waste of time, and it's a waste of effort that these people put into studying and coming up with these recommendations. So I am all for moving this piece forward.
Thank you. Yes, David. Liza?
Yeah, again, provided we're like planning.
Baby steps. I
Um,
promise.
So reaching out to the state senators and making sure that we, and making the ask of a new home rule that will include Main Street residents into access to permits.
I've also put on my list for tomorrow was asking some more specific questions to Wade Beltramo at Nikon. I'm sure there'll be good guidance there as well.
Great.
He's great.
But I agree. I think it's going to be a messy process, and I think that there's going to be a lot of complaints and feedback, and no matter which way we do it, it's going to be
Yes.
that way. So we might as well get started. And the parking plan is generally really good. It's just that one piece that I really think we have to commit to taking care of at some point. It's going to take some time, but it's not a fast thing.
I agree.
All right.
Okay,
Go to my
so
Dutch bro. After that consensus word came out of my mouth. So that my thought is that the, getting this to actually be working is going to
at least.
right? Steps to implementation. Need to redesign the application so that it reflects a whole bunch of stuff, like where they live and looks official. We need to have different types of permits. We need homeowner permit. Eventually we'll need some other kinds. Mayor and I had a conversation about someone having work done on their house. Maybe when they apply for a permit, there'll be opportunity for the contractor to have so he can park on the street, that kind of thing. So people shouldn't worry about, all these little things are going to come up, but as I try to think of them.
Some of the things that were raised during the public discussion were like people who have home health aides that don't have driveways. So guest or service permits. When you spoke with Officer Burke about permits, there was originally a discussion of a hanging permit, but Officer Burke recommended something different.
Right, that was next, not bullet point.
Go for it.
You guys would be so I did speak to Officer Burke, and he prefers a sticker on the back left window for the officer's visibility. And Jeff gave me one of these. This is our winter parking. I have a very creative person who works for me who did these by hand. They obviously are not going to be this big and whatever. That's my favorite, just for the record. But anyway, instead of something just numbers and Village of Cold Spring, I mean, it's sort of like the ATK on your car or the OBX or something, like, I think it should be like, oh, you got what? Not, did you see that? So anyway, I thought we could kind of make it fun as opposed to make it just utilitarian.
And we need to think through the, I love the visual of this, something that is of the village and identifies folks who live here. if it's a year-on-year permit, how we manage that. If there are, you know, the Empire Pass will have the primary pass and then I think it's the Empire Pass, and then a year-on-year sticker over it. Like you see people who go back to the same beaches every year, and they've got the 2019 and the 2020, and we'll have to think about how these stickers, how we extend the lifetime of them.
There's carstickers.com, 100 stickers for $1.21 a piece. Some of them peel off. It depends on how we decide if you want the permit transferable or not transferable. If it comes off, then it's more expensive. It's like $1.43, I believe it was.
The one we use for winter parking, I mean, that's one of the benefits is peels right off. And then you replace it next year if you apply.
And people
So
haven't had
it's
trouble
not-
getting them off.
I'm good with the razor blade. Personally.
No, these,
Till I dropped it in the cigarette lighter and blew the fuse.
I've actually never noticed these on cars. Do these hang in the back left?
Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
big.
You weren't with us then, but I had sent out a little picture of something. It said resident parking permit, and it had a little snail on it because I didn't have any village thing to put on there. But you know, I can scan this and make up some things for you to see
We could take something like this and just put
right over it.
CS22 in white. And that would be this year's permit. And then next year is CS23. And the officers would see that, just 22, 23, like the year number, and the same way your car registration, the officers can see it really easily and clearly from far. If you put it in white, like the numbers in the water or whatever, or in the sky.
Do the winter parking permits have numbers on each permit?
no, I put numbers on there.
Does it mean you put it on the sticker?
I write it on the year. We're talking 15 of them a year.
But versus putting the license plate on, like if you put the license plate on, then people can't peel it off and put it on another car and kind of move things around. How much does it matter?
We haven't
Well, you do it-
discussed as a board whether we want them transferable or not.
Do you do this by hand
Conversation.
when you put it on the number? You just write it on here? Okay. So that's a good point. My recollection, and I don't know for sure, I need to go back and look in detail. My recollection of the committee's discussion was that they not be transferable. Do you remember that detail?
I didn't really drill it down too hard. I think there were different opinions expressed, but it wasn't like it's not in the recommendation packet that it must be stuck to. And I know that there was definitely like for the service employees, like your electrician coming in, your plumber, your home aide, to have like a hanging, something that can be hung so that it's passed from one worker to the next.
Right. And like a handicap sticker has dates on it.
Right.
So it's good until.
Well, that kind of feeds into the Airbnb guest thing that I had up in Nantucket. Those are for the rear view mirror
Right.
to hang.
Well, you could have ones that are stickers for residents at one
Exactly.
price, and then the guest service worker could be an additional thing that is a hanger
Trying to find.
for your Airbnb guest permit, perhaps be looped in. I mean, that was kind of when we were talking about Airbnb
Right.
permits, like loop it in with the residential parking plan rather than putting it in the Airbnb plan.
So that is going forward on its own track. This is going forward on its own track, and at some point it will make sense for them to merge into a unified system.
Sorry, guys, I'm just looking for a picture of that gizmo, but maybe it's in screenshot. So then signage. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. That's what I was going to ask you about. Yeah.
Signage. I looked like a stalker today. Tweeps saw me. I captured her walking the dog. Because first I did it in pencil and it was so hard to read. Anyway, so I marked all the places there are posts on on the side streets. It seems like there are a lot of posts let's say like 5 hours and 4 hours, and maybe they're not exactly in the right places. I counted, when we talked about it, we had 35, and I don't, from that original thing, but I'm not sure, I marked this up and I can pass it around if you want to look at it, but I got 24 this time. And, you know, there's like on Rock Street, they had 3 spaces, but there's actually 4 there on the curve. And there's a 5-hour parking sign there that it won't be useful at all. And then there's 2 5 hours on Rock Street and a no parking this side on that side. And that's all the signage back there. Whereas I think we need, you know, the arrows this way and then one in the middle that says, that's arrows this way. So it says resident parking permit zone.
Between signs.
You may need to install a few.
We may,
Yeah.
we
And
may.
he and his team said it took about, you know.
Yeah,
30
it's
minutes.
not a big thing. He also said that he could like put something over the existing like 5-hour, 2-hour, 4-hour stuff and reuse the tops of them. I'm not sure how. He said that's a doable thing. So I have to talk to him about that. But there's my parking signs. You get 40 of them for $15.45 a piece, or roadtrafficsigns.com, 50 pieces for $10.75.
I think we have to work through procurement with Michelle on the vendors that are available to us.
But they are generally just
Yeah.
for in your mind what things cost. Not that we're going to use any of these necessarily.
So this dovetails with something else, which is the update of chapter 126, which is vehicles and traffic, which was done last summer. And trustees Early and Murphy spent quite a lot of time with officer in charge Burke surveying the signs around the village and making recommendations for changes that should be made to the amount of time that parking is allowed and, you know, what the length would be, where it was allowed, et cetera. The code updates were done last July. It's public record, it's the law. This piece hasn't happened yet. So while the code may reflect updated thinking on parking, the signs that are on the street in many places do not. So this piece of getting the residential parking kind of needs to go hand in hand with finishing that work that was begun. So that our officers, for example, this weekend at Wall Street was packed cheek by jowl with cars. It is not wide enough for cars to be parking there and be a 2-way street. The signs that identify, there are no signs identifying it as a no parking area. So our officers can't ticket for no parking because it's not designated that way. So in order for us to be capturing that kind of revenue and being able to enforce, we need to finish that job of the physical placement of signs laid out in the 126 roadmap. So this is one piece of that larger puzzle.
Yeah, and you know, I mean, we're not going to have 5-hour parking and 4-hour parking, and that we can, you know, I mean, I don't know how many signs we can actually repurpose, but I think we're going to need signs anyway.
For sure. But there's certainly a number of posts that can be reused.
Interesting. What is it?
Stone.
Furnace.
No furnace.
Furnace. You've got 2 signs on utility poles.
Which is illegal.
Yeah, I don't think we're allowed to do that anymore.
To the utility poles. I know. I was like, So, and then at the Tots Park, the only sign on all of High Street is at the curb saying "Don't walk your dog," but the other dog sign on 9D is physically, you know, as you enter the park, which is, I think, more appropriate for where the dog sign should be, so we can still sign post that. But there's, you know,
Some repurposing can happen.
yeah, there's some repurposing, not of utility poles.
So do you see the next stage of this map being identifying
Larger,
larger
please.
and identifying exactly which language needs to be placed in which location?
Yes. I almost want to like commandeer your whiteboard. When Bruce Campbell had the whole map in the office when they were redoing the sidewalks, we're not going to go that far, probably. But we need a bigger, even if it's just street by street, because I mean, this was just that way, I think it would be big enough, but it was difficult
For
to
what you were looking at.
what I was trying.
I'm wondering too about whether, in the same way that you would brand a sticker, if it makes sense to sort of have a visual brand on the residential area so that it's easy to find as a cue.
Everything should be branded.
So that
Everything should be branded. Agreed.
You got those little circles on the stickers on the windows and you connect it to the sign up there. That'll make it so much easier for
Yeah.
everybody to understand that concept is connected.
Yeah, exactly.
Here.
Yeah,
I like that.
yeah, very smart.
The simpler the better. I mean, that's the language you speak. You're really good at visual language. Maybe sort of thinking about a lookbook for residential parking signs. That's something you'd be
Yeah,
interested in doing.
yeah.
Right on.
yeah, I mean, I know Catherine's been working on sign designs too. And it shouldn't be that complex. It should just be like 3 words and a little stick picture.
We need to compare it to what we're required to have by state law. So we make sure we're including the language that we have, but identifying locationally. And I like the idea of placing the map around for a while in different locations.
It would help. We could even
The new next year's map.
So there are a couple of other other outstanding things that are related to the implementation of this. And one is that Haldane Street on the south side of the Tots Park was contemplated to become a one-way street. And there was a good deal of debate about which direction it should go, and that discussion wasn't finished. The solution at the time was that all of the one-way street proposals got pulled out of Chapter 126 for consideration later. So that needs to be a conversation that we have with that neighborhood, because they have really legitimate concerns about traffic flow and children, and also with our officer in charge and with the fire company regarding movement through. I don't remember what the concern was related to the fire department, but there was some concern about trucks turning a corner there. So we need to check in with them and make sure so that was one piece, is resolving the flow issue on what the committee was trying to get away from was having cars parked on both sides of Haldane and have it be a two-way street, and have kids darting in and out to the park.
You can't have all of that.
You can't have all of it,
Right
exactly.
now, if you have cars parking on 2 sides, you can only get through one little area.
Exactly.
So it can't be two-way if you're parking on both sides. We want to remove the parking on one half.
Right.
And you can have two-way, but
Can't do everything.
our parking is rather precious.
So how do you get to the safest solution? You can't. We have a couple of other chapter updates to consider in 126, and my thought is that if we're looking at Haldane, we should and concentrate, because we have to have a public hearing to change 126, that we should concentrate the things that we're looking at as changes in 126. And the outstanding issues are identifying railroad, stone, and cross as no trucks larger than X, in the same way that Wall Street is. I was on that street with residents the other day, and Catherine raised a point. Catherine raised the issue that people are coming up Railroad and turning. It's a one-way street. They shouldn't be turning toward Main Street, but they kind of look around and they know they want to get back to Main Street, so they hedge their bets and they turn on to Stone Street, going the wrong way to get to Main Street. And Catherine's point today was, well, what if it were one way the other direction? What if that were the natural flow back out from the top of Railroad back out to Main, in addition to the truck route, so that Cross to Stone would be moving from Fair Street to Main in one direction.
Because when you come up, instead of turning towards Main, you're turning towards Northern and you're going out, and then on Sunday you got church and you can't come this way on Fair, and it's just like the car just keeps looping around the village, it's just like, get them back, they're looking for parking, it's not back there. And I think it's a more natural flow, and I said to Kathleen earlier today too. I've always looked at Rock Street, but I think there's more parking spaces on the right side, on the natural parking side of, parallel parking than the left side. And one of these days I'm gonna actually just take a tape measure out there. But there are some odd reasons why some streets go the direction that they go in or are one way altogether, and it just, I don't know if at some point we do a study on that kind
I
of
do
stuff.
think there
but-
needs to be a full traffic engineering
study,
study, a
yeah.
traffic flow study through the village, and I'm really hoping that that can happen as part of Fjord Trail.
Great.
Because when we're struggling as it is, and there have to be some better and logical answers, and there are people who are traffic engineers, that's their job. So, but for now, where we can hit what we know to be a couple of trouble spaces, we know the trucks on Railroad and Stone is a problem. I'd like to have a conversation with the neighborhood about direction. The other piece that was pulled out of the 126 change last summer was, it happens to be my street, and full disclosure, but Locust Ridge is the route out for the buses from Haldane, and it's also the route out for the ambulance. It is one way, 2 hours a day, twice a day from September to June. It is absurd. There's parking on both sides. There is not really enough room for 2 lanes of traffic, and people who experience it as a school street, like parents who experience it during the school year as a one-way street, identify it as a one-way street all year long and fly through. And we have issues of when there's snow, the street narrowing down so much between piles and cars and then large vehicles, it slows down the ambulance on the way out. So we have had discussions in the past about making that a one-way street all the time, so that you build another loop. Cedar is one way going north, Locust Ridge one way going south.
Yeah, all those
Um,
streets up there should be.
And when I floated that idea as part of the 126 discussions last summer, there was a lot of neighborhood support to do that. Less support for consideration of other streets, but I think at this point, just keep it simple and solve the very obvious problem, which is the bus route and the ambulance route.
Question. Do you see the need to do the 126 code updates as part of the rollout, or is that a separate
Well,
issue?
where it hinges and where it gets stuck is Haldane. Making a determination about which way Haldane flows. And my point is that if you're having that discussion and you're already in a public hearing talking about changing a street direction, why not do those 3 pieces as part of one public hearing? Yeah, you have to decide which direction which side of the street the parking is going to be, wherever it is. Here.
Yeah, right now it's 2-way with parking only on that side.
But honestly, I can't remember. I have to go back and watch the video. I can't remember do you remember if people want it going toward 9D or away from 9D? I think it was toward 9D.
It should go toward, well,
You don't remember either.
no, I don't.
Whatever the parking committee was proposing,
The neighborhood did not want.
the neighborhood did not want.
Right. Right.
And it was- and it was-
They wanted it to go out and not in. The big concern was on Haldane was that people fly down from 90, going 90 speed, fly down Haldane and skip the stop sign and just turn on to High Street one way or the
And
other.
all those, I was there today when
Yeah,
all the
go
kids
ahead.
were getting out of school.
Jeff sat through all of that.
As you talk about Railroad, as you talk about Locust Ridge, Haldane Street, I think consulting with the fire company should be first
Oh,
and
absolutely.
foremost, because
Absolutely.
the residents may say we want it to go this way, and that may be the consensus, and the fire company say, you know what? We can't make that turn.
Yeah, well, I mean,
frankly,
that's-
we need to go the other way because
Yeah, that's what I said at the very beginning, that I knew that they had raised concerns about that intersection, but I don't remember the specifics of what it was. And so the place we have to start is first response
Yeah,
and then neighborhood.
they may have some very definitive.
Yeah, I know that Siegel raised a lot of concern about that.
And Larry too,
for the conversation to have.
Order to put signs up on housing. It's still working on that one.
Currently,
It's currently parking. And now.
No problem. Oh, because there were no cars there. And whereas. So.
Treeps, can you hear us now? All right.
Like, so we lost connection there for a second.
So, so Articles 2 and 3 lay out specifically which are the one-way roadways, where are prohibited turns at intersections, where are U-turns, which are through streets, which are stop intersections, which are yield intersections. So literally everything is identified, and like I said, a lot of the modification that happened in this change last summer has not been reflected in the physical signage.
Okay.
We're not gonna be able to do it all at once, but things like Wall Street isn't obvious. Dealing with getting the Haldane right isn't obvious. So let's look at parking within most spaces, no parking anytime, seasonal parking restrictions. Well, it got pulled from the one-way street, so it's not gonna show up there. Anyway,
Definitely the red line version of 126, so that has been adopted or no? Yes. Okay.
so if you go into the code, it's come out of the parking committee portion.
Yeah.
And go under village code, the final
in
versions of that, yeah.
Or in black.
So how do you wanna move? What do you wanna do? Because
So my suggestion. Hang on, let me look at my note here. I think we need to deal with cataloging specifically what signs need to be on the streets. What ones are there that need to be switched out to meet the code, right? On these, I think we start with this as a working area. Does that seem like a reasonable, as the priority working area? Cataloging what's there and what needs to be there, and then working on design.
I generally have that. The problem with this is it's just too small to really make it a viable work road, you know?
You
So,
just need it.
It's
Print
that.
bigger.
Mhm.
yeah,
We'll send it to Grace and get it printed bigger.
I will get it as big as the TV.
And I think while you're working on that, the pieces of the language that needs to be adjusted in 126 is maybe something that another team of us can be working on to put forward for consideration, because this has to get resolved to make that the parking on that portion happen. So that maybe that is almost step one as you're working through the design process is looking at those modifications. We need how many weeks out? If we were planning, what do you think would be a target date for a public hearing on those proposals?
Street changes.
Those three changes: Haldane, Railroad, potentially the Cross Stone Corridor.
Well, we need the changes first. John will probably have to get involved.
Yep.
To a degree. We're
Yep.
probably looking at least 4 to 6 weeks out.
Okay,
Public hearing,
so we'd be looking at end of July, roughly.
yes.
Okay.
But I think, keep in mind that there's also the code update to 134 that really needs to take priority.
I don't see this portion of the modifications as being onerous,
No, but it does take
Takes
time
time.
away from.
for sure. But we can't move this forward.
Right.
It's like we're in a lot of places with a lot of projects that got sort of set down and walked away from. We're at a state with a lot of them where we've got to move them forward
Yeah.
somehow.
Then we might have, Fran might have put together a catalog of these existing signage versus what needs to be changed based on the code.
If they are willing to share that with Catherine, that would be immensely helpful. I know that she and Marie and Larry spent a lot of time
Yeah.
and documenting, but those
I
documents
might
aren't available.
have to look to see if she said that.
Okay. But Sweeps, have any thoughts? Muted, babe.
Yeah, they definitely should share that information. That's, I mean, otherwise, you know, if the work was done, I don't see what the proprietary reason for them to keep it to themselves. That said, I do think that, you know, keeping in mind that we want, unlike in the past, we want things to look a little bit more, a lot more uniform and branded appropriately, you know, I would want to make sure that whatever changes that we're looking at include those design elements that we were talking about before. So not just, you know, like if we're putting in a new one-way sign someplace, that it kind of be in step with the rest of the look of the signs that we're putting in the rest of the village, if that makes sense.
Well, but again, that's why I come back to starting in a focused way
Yeah,
with the residential parking area, because that seems more easily accomplished than trying to manage the whole.
well, sure. But once we have something, once there's some sort of design element in place, then it will be easier to move forward
Sure, once it's a
for the
template.
future. Yeah, yeah. And unfortunately for us, because of the way things are left, I think it's true. Like we're gonna have to do multiple things at the same time. It's just, I don't see any way around it.
Great. Okay. The other important element of this, feels like there's 500 important elements of this, is hiring a parking enforcement officer. He's going to be making a recommendation to us for next week. He had 3 candidates, 2 dropped out having taken other jobs. He has 1 candidate left. And we need that. Not only does that person need signs in place to be able to write tickets, but where we can write tickets, we need to be writing tickets on the weekend.
Well, we've got 4 to 6 weeks to a public hearing. I mean, at least we can make some money.
Right.
Is it really now?
Management, we've control a handle on.
I mean,
Any other-
also, sorry,
Go ahead.
I mean, like even in the places, you know, like you were talking about Wall Street, like even in the places where there are not signs, and so they can't write tickets. I mean, I think there's like a broken windows
hierarchy,
theory.
yeah.
Yeah, and like a chaos thing that's happening that needs to be stopped. And I don't know, I appreciate that we need like actual something to write toward, but some of the stuff that I saw over the weekend was just like total cuckoo. Like I can't imagine that these people, wherever they're coming from and enjoying Cold Spring, are going home and parking at like diagonally to a street, you know, like the way some of the parking situations were here. So I don't know what can be done, but I think we need to be enforcing as much as possible right now.
Identify in an email to Larry and copy to the rest of us what you saw as those big problem areas, so that we know the other low-hanging fruit. I mean,
Yeah.
Wall Street's crazy to be used in the way it was last weekend.
Yes. Agreed. Yes, I can do that.
you signs, we're going to your timetable, right?
I'm still, yes, I'll stay on back. Yeah. Um, This.
You guys are muted again. There we go.
Yeah, just,
Get it.
and then I can talk to Greg.
Internet activity issues tonight.
Yep.
You and I continue preparing the elements of the changes that need to happen in draft form, whether we look at and get for review for conversation.
Focused on those 3 streets.
That those 3 problem
We don't need
areas.
to do anything related.
Well, if you and I keep
parking.
working on that part, while they're doing the more sort of documentarian and creative portion, then it moves us forward on both tracks.
And if we have, I'll check 126, but if there's already areas that are no parking, like on Railroad, we could just order no parking signs and have Bugsy and the boys put those in.
Yes,
It's gotta be in the code.
that's what she's saying. if
I'm
it's in the
saying if
code.
it's already
Oh,
in there, if
and
it's
that's
been
what-
put in there.
That's what Jeff and Catherine are going to speak with Fran about is where are the documented, where are your lists? Can we have access to the lists? Right, so that we're not
But the
reinventing
code
the
would
wheel.
Say where?
It will, but they documented what exists right now in terms of signage to compare. This is like the code was the, if we, in the ideal world, we would look like this, and then there's the reality on the ground. And did Bugsy, when you met with Bugsy, did he provide you an inventory of what signs he's got at the highway department?
Said he had a lot of stuff.
Okay, so maybe that's something you can work with Bugsy on, Tweets, is providing an inventory of what available signage we have right now
Okay.
and what available poles we have, what bolts we have, what do we need?
They are pretty rusty out there. Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of poles. Some of them are in best places. I mean, High Street literally has nothing. Church, nothing. I think there's one, no parking here to corner.
The other, I'm just thinking this through in my head and I'm seeing, hi Jeff, I'm seeing the name of motto on the screen. It makes me think of Garden Street. One of the other issues of concern that was raised during public conversation was whether driveways are sufficiently marked with yellow crosses. And Garden Street is one of the problem spots where some of the crosses are smaller than the driveway. Oh, you live on Garden Street too.
Well, the mix of the space for driveways is narrow and people park in the yellow all the time. Yeah. So that's,
So it's enforcement issues.
yeah. But so if that was part of a general parking enforcement, I think it would make the streets more.
It has to be. It has to be. And some of the places on Furnace, Garden, etc. The space that remains between 2 yellow boxes isn't big enough for a car.
Yeah.
So people take what space they can. So maybe that whole portion, because it doesn't end up being an actual parking space, maybe the whole portion needs to be Xed. I don't know.
This is probably a bigger piece, but Beacon did a really interesting kind of resident-based redesign of Main Street, a lot to address parking. And I think one of the things they did was that they marked spaces and they created more spaces that way, right? Like if you go to a city and well, they did, okay, so I guess I didn't tell I didn't read the whole, I didn't read their report.
You create spaces, but you don't create more by measuring them out. You create more by not marking them. But
Okay, well,
if it's still more useful.
it might be a report maybe in all of our free time,
where-
learn from their
yeah.
process, because they did a number of actions to kind of creatively figure out their parking in Beacon.
And they're still doing free parking?
Yeah.
Okay,
Maybe not long.
anything else we need to cover on this tonight, or we feel like we have our
Oh my
marching
God.
orders for
No,
this
I think
topic.
we have good folks to, take the step off the curb.
as it were?
No shades for
Notions once. So, Eliza will be with us in just a sec. We do have a first public comment period if there was anyone who wanted to make comments on our primary workshop topic tonight, which is resident parking. Jeff or Lillian, or I think we lost Walter.
My Turton was on. I don't know if we lost him.
I think we lost him also.
So seeing none, we'll move on to the next item then.
Thanks when the air conditioning goes off.
Intense. I left a chunk of stuff on my desk. Very well organized this evening. Here's the chapter. Okay. Next discussion is flag display policy. So having watched what our neighbors in town of Phillipstown are enduring in terms of discussion related to flags, I asked the village attorney, we over the winter, the village was asked by a resident if we would hang a Ukrainian flag, showing solidarity and support. And we agreed to do that. I think if we're honest, we didn't think through sort of the Pandora's box that was being opened in terms of and the possibility requests. So there was a second request to hang the progress flag that was granted. And in the meantime, we've watched this sort of drama unfold in Phillipstown with other requests. And then you get into that sticky area where you are sort of acting as arbiter of free speech. And A, it's a distraction from the work we need to do. B, it's not a productive use of our time. And C, it leaves too many possibilities for problem. And so I asked John, the village attorney, John first, to give us an opinion on flag hanging. And you all saw the recommendation he made was that we establish a policy that is we hang none as a government agency, that we not take a position via hanging flags going forward. So the progress flags are up now, and they will be up for the month. We committed to that. But based on his recommendation, I would like to have him draft a policy related to flags. Any discussion on the topic?
I think it's a good idea. We've heard plenty of like freedom of speech, and there are flags that we would all be supportive of, and there are flags that we would all be really uncomfortable to have flying here. And I think at the end of the day, it's better to not open that can of worms or to close that can of worms as quickly as possible.
Among the reasons I feel really strongly about this is that our facilities are places in which the public comes to receive services, and I don't want anyone to have to walk under a symbol that they aren't comfortable with or that makes them feel unwelcome. So that's kind of a baseline. So are the trustees supportive of that, having John draft a policy?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
And the policy will be no flags.
Right. So for now, we will,
state flag,
for now,
POW flag.
until that policy is in place, yes, until that policy is in place, we won't accept any requests for flags, and we'll get it in place as quickly as possible. And going forward, only the United States flag, the state flag, and the POWMI flag will hang on village properties. Okay.
So you're putting a moratorium on displays.
Right, we're not accepting requests, and we're not approving displays.
We need to vote on that too?
Probably should, if you can, moratorium, and if
Okay.
you're asking John to adopt a policy.
So I make a motion to adopt a moratorium on any approvals of flag hanging requests on municipal properties, and propose that the village attorney we work with the village attorney to develop a standing policy on flags. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next big topic for the night, discussion on the formation of an ad hoc short-term rental committee. I was delighted with the number of applications that we got, and really, I think really high quality applications, folks who haven't volunteered for other things but have a lot to offer, a lot of good brain power. And it's not often as a board of trustees that we get so many people to choose from. So I think there were 14 total, I think 13 or 14. So I'm going to recommend to you all, and we can discuss 9 of the applications tonight. And my recommendation is based on a few factors. The desire for a range of views on short-term rental, and I think we do have a good range of opinions to choose from. Representation both from short-term rental operators and concerned neighbors. We have that both as well. And obviously it needs to be an uneven number so they can tie break. This isn't a standing committee, it's an ad hoc committee, but we don't want to leave them in a position where they can't make a decision on our recommendation either. So the folks that I'm recommending and we can discuss are Brana Spuskovich, I don't know if I'm pronouncing her name correctly. Bolshevik. Peter Farrell, Travis Fife, John Lane, Tom O'Quinn, Marianne Remy, Megan Shea, Lara Veloto, and Jen Zwarek. Discussion. One of the applications was not a resident of the village. We were explicit that that was a bar, that was a requirement.
Can you say yours again?
Okay, sorry. Brana, who's an operator. Peter Farrell is an operator. Travis Fife is a resident with concern. John Lane is an operator. Tom O'Quinn is an operator.
John Lane, sorry.
John Lane is on Mountain Avenue,
Okay.
and was someone quite engaged with the public process in the last go round. Tom O'Quinn, Marianne Remy, Megan Shea is resident on Orchard Street, and has some really thoughtful ideas about balancing commerce and quality of life. Lara Veloto is an operator, and Jen Zwarek. So we have 3, let's see, we have 1, 2, 3, we accepted, I am proposing all of the residents, the straight residents who applied, all of those were not, and that are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 operators, and among them they represent owner-occupied, one that has an accessory structure, and a range of approaches. Some who have had experience operating in other locations as well. So total of 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
Is that going to be hard for them to?
Well, I think we have to think carefully about, I don't have a recommendation tonight about chair, because I want to talk to some folks before that recommendation. I think a strong chair is important. I think it's a good group of people and a good balance of views. I was originally thinking 5 to 7.
Too many.
You think it's too many? Okay.
Yeah, I think about that.
Others?
Huge committee.
You know, I like the idea of committees, and when I was on the board before, it was never done like that, and I fully support this idea. I have no idea what a good sized committee is in terms of, you know, actually getting the work done. I think probably 5 might be too few, but 9 might be too many at this point. But I'm not, again, I'm flexible because it depends on the mix of things. I mean, they're all so good, you don't want to cut
Right.
anybody
Well,
out.
and each of them brought something to the table, and that's how I arrived at the recommendation I've made. Does anyone have any objection to any of the nominations? Any particular objection?
I don't like them. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, I was thinking about this today, and it seems a little bit heavily weighted towards operators, maybe.
Okay.
I I feel like while John Lane was somebody who, whose concerns we very much wanted to consider. He was like one of those examples of an STR where like a family's needs were dependent on it. I think that he provided a lot of feedback already, which might, you know, say like, we hear you, but maybe he doesn't need to be sitting on the committee.
So you advocate for sort of fresh perspectives from folks we haven't heard from before.
That's right.
Okay, so if you're following that line of logic, the other person we have had comment from Peter. Peter Farrell, and you could pull Peter and John, and then you'd have a fresh set of folks that we haven't really heard from in terms of operators.
Are Peter and John operators?
Yes.
Oh, that is a
So then
lot
that
of-
gets you down to one. Wait a minute. It gets you down to 7, and of them, 1, 2, 3, 4 are operators, and 1, 2, 3 are non-operating residents.
That seems a little bit more balanced to
Okay.
me. That's just my 2 cents. Not that I have anything against Peter or John in terms of.
But you raise a good point. You raise a good point that we had a lot of feedback from them in the last go round. So this is an opportunity for fresh voices and maybe some creative approaches.
I would think 6 operators out of 9 is a lot.
So now you're down to
So I think that we could reducing it to 4 and
2, 3, 4. Yeah, 4 and 3. I'm comfortable with that.
Creeps, what do you say?
I mean, I think that, you know, we didn't get many non-operators.
Right, these are the 3 we got.
So, I mean, I hear you on having a bit more balance, but I think for what we have, that's kind of probably the most balance that we're going to get. I think being an operator doesn't necessarily mean that you can't be reasonable and be balanced in your approach and thinking on this. So I don't know that that's a disqualification for somebody being on this committee personally, but and as far as numbers, I mean, again, I would tend to think that I wouldn't want to exclude people who are interested in working on this. This is a hot topic. So I'm a little bit agnostic as to number. If you think less is more, that's fine with me.
You're on the trail committee, right? That's a huge committee.
committees. There's some sweet number that people say of committees, and I would think it's somewhere around 7. I think 9 gets to be a lot, even just for scheduling, it can be really
Right,
tough.
scheduling can be done.
Making sure that like if people miss it, then you have to set people up. Like if you're trying to make progress in a shorter amount of time, having a smaller number of like committed people who have tasks that they can do, I think you can make more progress. But I think 7 is still gives a real diversity of
view,
perspective.
And even with removing those 2, there's still a wide range of approaches, I think,
Yeah,
with remains.
Yeah.
Okay, well, so then we are, I think what we're putting forward is appointing Brannis, Travis, Tom O'Quinn, Marianne Reamy, Megan Shea, Lara Veloto, and Jen Zwarek. And I would like a little time to think about chair on that. So bring that back to you next week. That is the proposal. Any further discussion? Okay. Should we probably need to vote on this. So that is the motion. So the names I mentioned go forward. Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks. And we'll get them rolling. I'm eager to have their feedback. Okay, docking requests. So every year the the Clearwater comes and they park at our dock for a few days and they let people climb on the boat, learn about how a schooner works and that vessel's particular part of our environmental history here in the village, environmental activism history. And they're asking for 2 docking dates. And they also take folks out on sails from our dock. They're asking for the July 22nd to the 25th and September 24th to the 25th. It's really beautiful to see the slope at the waterfront. I did speak with the clerk and the officer in charge. There have not been any problems with that before. And the other element is that previous boards have traditionally waived the fee for Clearwater as a not-for-profit, the docking fees. Any discussion?
Has any residents on the waterfront ever had a complaint about that? I mean, you and I think it's beautiful. But
About the Clearwater?
Yeah.
Not that I know of.
No.
Okay, great. Just wanted to throw that question out.
I think it's just so stunningly beautiful when it's part of the dock.
Yeah.
Okay, so for the dates of 7/22 to 25 and 9/24 to 25, I make a motion to approve the docking at no charge of the Clearwater for its public education program.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks. Okay, Lillian, you've been waiting so patiently. Now we come to the fire company's request. So the fire company has, or is this the 20th year, Lillian?
Good evening, everyone. Yes, this is our 20th year.
Can you tell us a little bit about the academy? For folks in the-
1 week in the last week in July, the Cold Spring Fire Company hosts approximately 50 students, grades 4 through 8, where they go through like a mock fire academy where they learn about the history of the fire service, fire equipment, the different types of trucks. It's an all-day affair from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We have guests come in from the State Fire Academy. We have other fire companies come down. Garrison Fire Company brings their fire extinguisher simulator. We've had John Peters from the Westchester County Police Department come with his arson dog. We've had state dogs come in who are search and rescue dogs. We've had the boat come down, the Westchester County Police boat come, the Putnam County Sheriff's Department boat. We get a staff flight helicopter to come in. The kids get taught primary first aid and CPR. And then on Friday, we take a trip up to the Firefighter Association of the State of New York Firemen's Museum in Hudson.
Oh, cool.
And upon our return on Friday, we have graduation. And this is where our 2 requests come in.
And those requests are to close Church Street from 4 to 9 p.m. so that your celebration can flow over into the street. That's been approved in years prior. And the other is to have a celebratory parade from Depot Square to the firehouse, right?
Yes, we did have a parade, I believe twice, once for our 10th and once for our 15th. Our 10th I was not here for, but I believe we also had one for our 15th. Both of those occasions, we started on High Street and went down to Marist Park. But since we're not going down to Marist Park this year and we're going to the firehouse, we needed a bit of a longer route than going just from High Street to the firehouse. So that's why we chose coming up the hill from Depot Square.
And I did connect to the officer in charge about this today. He's happy to assist and make sure that traffic is cleared and entrances from side streets are secured so everyone's safe as they're walking up Main Street. I think it's great. Last year, I can't remember walking on Main Street and the kids were up in I don't think there were kids up there actually, but it was a giant, like a bucket truck, like 4 to 5 streets up. And I wanted to vomit just looking at it, but it's pretty cool. Any discussion among trustees?
I totally support it. I think the academy is great, and any way to get kids in the next generation of volunteers enthusiastic about it is smart. So I'm in.
I think as long as the officer in charge he thinks he can manage it. It sounds a little like it's a busy time of year, but if he's not concerned, then I'm totally supportive.
It's a little quieter on a Friday afternoon, yeah. And it's actually, it's a really festive time on Church Street. Is this a vote, clerk?
Yes.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion?
Make a motion to close, Church Street on, July 29th from 4 to 9, subsequent parade, to celebrate the 20 years of the Fire Academy anniversary.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Right on. Thanks for being patient, Lillian.
Yes, thank you very much. Have a good night.
We have tabled minutes, I'm sure much to Jeff's consternation, and may we recognize how much time he devotes, especially on weekends, to preparing the minutes. So we will read them faithfully in the next 7 days, promise. Do we have a motion regarding bills? Oh, that was displeasure coming from that side of the room.
Want to make the motion? It's your first batch. Right on the bottom of the front,
Oh, thank
the
you.
batch number in the middle.
Oh, thank you. So I make a motion to approve of bills batch number 6490 in the amount of $37,152.28.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I learned a lot.
Tweet said her mouth moved. Yeah, so this was your first time going through.
Jeff answered my question.
Okay, I think we have no public left for public comment. That
Oh,
off the
it's
list.
been abandoned.
Anything else on the topics that were before us tonight that we didn't cover and we need to cover? Okay, so motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Hope your house feels better, please.
Thank you.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Night. Bye.
Has everybody been sick now? I mean, can we, or are we gonna go around?
Go around again. Say that.
I know when there's a kid in the house, there's always something comes home with them.
Bye.
Thanks a lot.
Good night.
I'm glad you were on the curb when I saw you today.
Bye.
Bye.